Trevor Whitaker stood at the head of his parents' dining table, one hand wrapped around Madison Vale's, the other lifting a crystal glass. "We're engaged," he announced. The room went silent. Veronica Barber sat across from him, still wearing her wedding ring, still legally his wife. Eleanor Whitaker smiled like this was a celebration. Grant looked away. Madison tilted her hand just enough for the diamond to catch the chandelier light. Veronica felt her heart crack, but she did not cry. She stood slowly. "Then I suppose everyone deserves to know what kind of man they're celebrating. If you've ever watched someone mistake kindness for weakness, stay with Veronica's story." 3 hours before Trevor Whitaker announced his engagement to another woman, Veronica Barber stood in front of the mirror in their marble bathroom trying to convince herself not to hope. That was the humiliating part. Not the affair rumors, not the coldness that had poisoned their marriage for the last year. Not even the separate bedrooms Trevor had started calling healthy space. Hope. Because hope made intelligent women ignore obvious things. The text from Trevor had arrived that morning while Veronica was reviewing invoices for a non-profit client. "Dinner tonight at my parents' place. We should talk peacefully. My family wants us to move forward like adults." Move forward. Those words had lived inside her head all day. Maybe he finally wanted honesty. Maybe he wanted counseling. Maybe he wanted to apologize. Maybe 15 years together still meant something. Veronica hated herself a little for believing any of those possibilities. She smoothed down the navy blue dress she finally chose after changing 3 times. Trevor used to say navy made her look intimidating, too serious, too sharp. She almost changed out of it. Then she stopped herself. Why was she still dressing for a man who barely looked at her anymore? The thought sat heavily in her chest as she fastened a pair of pearl earrings her mother had given her before the wedding. Back when Veronica still believed love was something you protected by sacrificing parts of yourself. The drive to Greenwich felt longer than usual. Rain tapped softly against the windshield while the dark Connecticut streets blurred past in silver reflections. Trevor hadn't come home the night before. He claimed he'd been working through acquisition details with his executive team. Veronica no longer knew which lies were small enough to survive and which ones destroyed entire lives. When she pulled into the circular driveway of the Whitaker estate, her stomach tightened instantly. A white Mercedes convertible sat near the front entrance. Madison Vale. Veronica recognized the vanity plate before she even turned off the engine. For a moment, she simply sat there, gripping the steering wheel. No. No, Trevor wouldn't bring her here tonight. Not here. Not in front of his family. Not while Veronica was still his wife. The front doors opened before she could gather herself. Eleanor Whitaker descended the stone steps in an elegant cream cashmere coat, her smile polished and brittle. "Veronica," she said coolly, "you made it. No hug, no warmth. Just obligation." Then Madison appeared behind her. Beautiful. Perfect. Effortless. She wore soft ivory silk and a diamond bracelet Veronica had never seen before. Her glossy brown hair fell over one shoulder like she belonged on the cover of a luxury magazine. Eleanor's entire face changed when she looked at Madison. "Darling, come inside before you freeze." "Darling." Veronica felt something sharp move through her ribs. Madison offered a small smile that pretended to be innocent. "Hi, Veronica." As if they were co-workers meeting unexpectedly at brunch. As if Veronica hadn't spent the last 6 months slowly realizing this woman was sleeping with her husband. The dining room glowed with candlelight and old money elegance. Crystal glasses, white orchids, silver cutlery polished to perfection. Everything looked beautiful. That somehow made it crueler. Grant Whitaker stood near the fireplace pouring bourbon. He nodded at Veronica without emotion. "You look well," he said. It sounded less like kindness and more like surprise. Trevor entered a moment later, sleeves rolled up, jaw tense. For one terrible second, Veronica still looked for remorse on his face. She found annoyance instead. "You're late," he said quietly. Veronica stared at him. "I'm late?" His eyes flicked toward Madison before lowering his voice further. "Let's not do this tonight." The audacity almost made her laugh. "Do what exists." Dinner began with artificial politeness. Eleanor talked endlessly about new beginnings. Grant discussed business expansion. Madison sat beside Trevor like she had already replaced Veronica in the architecture of the family. And Trevor let her. Every time Madison touched his arm, Eleanor smiled slightly. Every time Veronica spoke, the room seemed to lose interest. It was subtle enough that an outsider might miss it. But emotional exile had a texture, and Veronica could feel every inch of it. Halfway through dinner, Eleanor lifted her wine glass. "I think life rewards women who know how to support a man's ambitions," she said casually. Madison smiled modestly. Trevor said nothing. Veronica looked down at her untouched food. For years she had supported Trevor's ambitions. She left Chicago when his startup failed in Boston. She used her inheritance to help cover payroll during his first financial crisis. She spent nights comforting him after investor meetings went wrong. She cared for Eleanor after surgery while Trevor traveled for work. She gave and gave and gave until she became invisible inside her own marriage. And now, another woman was being praised for supporting the life Veronica helped build. Madison leaned toward Trevor. "Did you tell them about Aspen?" Trevor smirked slightly. "Not yet." "Aspen? A trip? A future?" Veronica set down her fork carefully. "Future plans?" she asked softly. The silence afterward was immediate. Trevor avoided her eyes. Madison glanced at Eleanor. And suddenly, Veronica understood something horrifying. Everyone at this table already knew what was coming. Everyone except her. A cold wave rolled through her body. Then Trevor stood. He picked up his champagne glass with complete confidence. "Since we're all here," he said, "I think it's time we shared the news officially." Veronica's pulse began pounding so loudly she could barely hear. Madison's hand slid into Trevor's, and then he smiled. Not at Veronica, at Madison. "We're engaged." The chandelier lights blurred. Somewhere in the room, Eleanor gasped theatrically, like this was a beautiful surprise instead of a public execution. Grant muttered, "Congratulations." Madison lifted her hand just enough for the diamond ring to sparkle. Veronica couldn't breathe. Not because Trevor cheated, not because he humiliated her, but because every single person in that room had agreed she deserved this moment. Trevor finally looked at her then. Not guilty, not ashamed, impatient, as if he expected her to behave correctly and disappear quietly. Veronica slowly rose from her chair. The room stiffened. Madison's expression flickered nervously for the first time. Trevor lowered his voice. "Veronica." Then she saw it. A dark leather folder sitting on the sideboard near Grant's chair. Her name printed neatly across the tab. Veronica Barber, Settlement Strategy. The blood drained from her face. This was planned. Not dinner, not family reconciliation, not honesty. A setup. A calculated humiliation designed to corner her emotionally before pushing divorce papers into her hands. They hadn't invited her there as Trevor's wife. They invited her there as an obstacle. Veronica looked around the table one final time. At Eleanor's cold elegance, at Grant's silence, at Madison clutching Trevor's hand, at the man she once loved more than herself. And something inside her stopped breaking, it hardened. Slowly, terrifyingly, she looked Trevor directly in the eyes. Then I suppose everyone deserves to know what kind of man they're celebrating. The entire room froze. And for the first time that night, Trevor Whitaker looked afraid. No one spoke after Veronica's words. The silence stretched across the dining room like broken glass. Trevor's jaw tightened first. Veronica, he warned quietly, his voice low and controlled. Don't do this. Don't do this. The same tone he used whenever she cried too loudly. Whenever she asked too many questions. Whenever she made him uncomfortable by reacting like a human being instead of a carefully trained accessory. Veronica slowly turned toward him. For years, she had mistaken his calmness for maturity. Now she recognized it for what it really was. Control. Madison shifted uneasily beside him, suddenly less confident than she had looked 5 minutes earlier. The giant diamond on her finger no longer sparkled triumphantly. It looked vulgar now. Heavy. Veronica glanced at it only briefly before meeting Madison's eyes. You knew, she said softly. Madison swallowed. Trevor immediately stepped in. This isn't her fault. Veronica almost laughed at the irony. Of course he wanted to protect Madison now. Trevor Whitaker always protected the women he desired. He only destroyed the women who loved him. Madison straightened slightly, forcing composure back into her expression. I didn't want tonight to happen this way, she said carefully. But you and Trevor have been emotionally separated for a long time. Emotionally separated. What elegant language for betrayal. Veronica folded her arms slowly across her chest. We are still legally married. The sentence landed hard. Grant Whitaker exhaled sharply in irritation, already exhausted by inconvenience rather than morality. Technically, he muttered. Veronica turned toward him. Technically, Grant leaned back in his chair like a king bored by peasant drama. Everyone here is an adult, he said. Dragging this out publicly helps no one. Publicly, interesting word choice from the family that had just staged her humiliation like theater. Eleanor dabbed her lips delicately with a napkin. Veronica, she said in that icy, polished tone, rich women used when disguising cruelty as wisdom. Sometimes dignity means accepting when something has run its course. The room blurred for a second. Not from tears, from rage. Veronica had spent 15 years trying to earn approval from people who decided long ago she would never truly belong to them. She remembered holidays spent reorganizing Eleanor's kitchen because Eleanor insisted things should be done properly. She remembered missing her own work conferences to attend Trevor's networking events. She remembered sitting beside Grant in hospital waiting rooms after his surgery while Trevor flew to Singapore for meetings. She remembered shrinking herself over and over until there was barely anything left. And still, these people looked at her like she was disposable. Trevor stood suddenly and approached her carefully, like someone handling unstable explosives. Can we not turn this into a scene, he asked quietly. A scene? Veronica stared at him in disbelief. You announced your engagement while your wife was sitting at the table. Trevor's expression hardened instantly. There's no reason to be dramatic. That word. Dramatic. Men like Trevor always used that word when women reacted appropriately to cruelty. Madison touched Trevor's wrist gently. Maybe we should slow down, she whispered. Veronica noticed it immediately. Not guilt. Fear. Madison was finally realizing this situation was uglier than Trevor promised her. Grant reached toward the leather folder on the sideboard and slid it across the polished dining table. The sound alone made Veronica's stomach twist. There's no point delaying reality, he said. The attorneys prepared a fair settlement. Fair. The folder stopped directly in front of Veronica. Her own name stared back at her in sharp black lettering. Inside were neatly organized divorce documents, property terms, Confidentiality agreements, asset discussions, everything prepared in advance, everything waiting for her before she even arrived. Veronica looked at Trevor slowly. You planned this? Trevor rubbed his forehead impatiently. We planned an adult conversation. No, Veronica said quietly. You planned an ambush. Eleanor sighed dramatically. Oh, for heaven's sake. Trevor lowered his voice again, trying to regain control. If you sign tonight, this can stay simple. There it was. Not heartbreak. Not apology. Management. Damage control. Veronica opened the folder with trembling hands. The numbers blurred slightly before her eyes. A monthly payment. Temporary housing support. Strict confidentiality clauses. Limitations on future claims. They had already calculated the value of erasing her. Her chest tightened so painfully she almost couldn't breathe. 15 years reduced to paperwork beside a half-finished glass of wine. Trevor crouched slightly beside her chair. Ronnie, he said softly. The nickname nearly broke something inside her. He only used it now when he wanted compliance. You know this marriage hasn't worked for a long time. Veronica looked at him carefully. For one terrible second, memories attacked her all at once. Trevor teaching her to ski in Vermont. Trevor crying the night his first business collapsed. Trevor holding her hand during her mother's funeral. Trevor whispering against her hair that she was the only person who truly believed in him. How terrifying that the same man who once made her feel safest now made her feel erased. She closed the folder gently. You could have divorced me, she said quietly. Trevor frowned. What? You could have sat me down like a decent human being and told me the truth. Her voice trembled slightly now, despite her efforts. Instead, you invited me here to watch your family celebrate, replacing me. Madison looked down. Even Eleanor seemed uncomfortable for half a second. But Trevor only became colder. I didn't want chaos. Veronica let out a hollow laugh. So you chose humiliation instead. His face darkened. You're making this uglier than it needs to be. No. He was. He just wanted her to carry the emotional burden quietly enough that his life remained convenient. Grant tapped the folder impatiently. Our attorneys recommend signing tonight before emotions escalate. Veronica looked at him sharply. Our attorneys? Trevor hesitated. Tiny. But enough. Enough for her to realize something horrifying. This had been coordinated long before tonight. The dinner, the announcement, the paperwork, the pressure, all of it. Madison suddenly spoke, her voice much smaller now. Trevor told me you already understood things were over. Veronica slowly turned toward her. Did he also tell you he still sleeps in our house? Madison froze. Trevor immediately stood straighter. That's irrelevant. Is it? Veronica asked. Madison looked at Trevor now instead of Veronica. The first crack. Small, but visible. Veronica noticed everything suddenly. The tension in Trevor's shoulders. The panic flickering behind Madison's eyes. The irritation on Grant's face. The calculation in Eleanor's silence. None of them expected resistance. They expected shame. Tears. Maybe begging. Not this. Trevor extended a pen as toward her. Just sign the papers. Veronica stared at the pen for several long seconds. Then she remembered something. Their prenup. Years ago, Trevor insisted it was just standard protection because of his family's wealth. Veronica barely read most of it because she trusted him completely back then. But one clause stayed in her memory. Infidelity tied to reputational or financial harm. At the time, Trevor laughed and called it old money paranoia. Now Veronica wondered whether the Whitakers accidentally built the weapon that could destroy them. Carefully, she slipped her phone from her purse. Trevor noticed instantly. "What are you doing, Redding?" She opened her camera silently beneath the table and snapped photos of every document page. Grant's expression sharpened. "Those papers are confidential." Veronica looked directly at him. "So was my marriage." Trevor reached suddenly for her wrist. Not violently, but possessively, instinctively, like he still had the right. Veronica looked down at his hand, touching her skin, then back up at him. "You don't get to touch me after announcing another woman as your future." Something in her voice made him release her immediately. The room felt colder now. Or maybe Veronica was finally seeing it clearly for the first time. She closed the folder, picked up her purse, and stepped away from the table. Eleanor rose slightly. Walking out won't solve anything. Veronica paused near the doorway. "No," she said quietly. "But staying would destroy what little dignity you people left me." Trevor followed her into the foyer. "Veronica, stop being irrational." She turned slowly. "Irrational," she whispered. "Trevor, you introduced your mistress as your fiancée before divorcing your wife." His face hardened again. For the first time all evening she saw it clearly. He wasn't sorry. He was inconvenienced. That realization hurt worse than the affair itself. Veronica opened her phone with shaking fingers as rain hammered softly against the windows beyond the front doors. She searched one contact. Claire Bennett, Harvard Law, divorce litigation specialist. And once upon a time, Veronica's college roommate. Trevor watched her carefully. "What are you doing?" Veronica lifted her eyes to his. Then she pressed send. "Claire, I need a lawyer tonight." Trevor's expression changed instantly. For the first time that evening, he looked genuinely nervous. Veronica barely remembered leaving the Whitaker estate. One moment, Trevor was staring at her phone with sudden panic in his eyes. The next, cold rain was hitting her face as she crossed the driveway toward her car. Her hands shook so badly, she dropped her keys twice before finally unlocking the door. The second she climbed inside and shut the door, the silence crushed her. No more polished dining room. No more controlled expression. No more pretending. Her entire body folded forward over the steering wheel as the first sob ripped out of her chest. It wasn't graceful crying. It wasn't cinematic. It was ugly. Animal. Years of humiliation collapsing at once. Veronica pressed both hands against her mouth to stop the sound, but nothing could stop it now. 15 years of loving Trevor Whitaker had taught her how to absorb pain quietly. Tonight shattered that skill. Rain streaked across the windshield while her breathing turned uneven and sharp. She could still see Madison's engagement ring flashing under the chandelier lights. Still hear Eleanor saying dignity meant acceptance. Still hear Trevor asking her not to make a scene, as if her devastation was socially inconvenient. Her phone buzzed violently against the passenger seat. Trevor. Again, and again, and again. She stared at the screen while tears blurred the name. Finally, another call appeared. Claire Bennett. Veronica answered instantly. "Hey, Claire," said her voice calm and alert, in that terrifyingly competent lawyer way. "Talk to me." The words broke something open again. For several seconds, Veronica couldn't speak at all. Claire waited silently while Veronica struggled to breathe. He announced his engagement. Veronica whispered finally. "At dinner, in front of his family." A pause. Then Claire asked quietly, "Are you safe right now?" The question startled Veronica. Not, "Are you okay? Safe?" As if Claire already understood something Veronica herself had not fully admitted yet. I'm in my car. Good. Don't go back to the house tonight. Veronica wiped her face shakily. I don't even know where to go. You go somewhere Trevor doesn't control. The sentence hit harder than expected. Somewhere Trevor doesn't control. Claire continued immediately, her tone shifting into strategy. Listen carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not respond emotionally to texts. Screenshot everything. Every message, every email, every document. Veronica closed her eyes. There are divorce papers already prepared. Of course there are, Claire muttered darkly. Did they pressure you to sign tonight? Yes. Good. That helps. Helps. The word felt surreal. Veronica pulled herself upright slowly. Claire kept talking. I want you in a hotel tonight. Nice one. Safe one. Use the joint card if you need to. Trevor would lose his mind over that. The thought almost made Veronica laugh through tears. He'll say I'm stealing. Claire's voice sharpened instantly. Veronica, listen to me carefully. You are his legal wife. Stop thinking like someone asking permission to exist inside your own marriage. Silence filled the car. Because that was exactly what Veronica had been doing for years. Claire exhaled softly. What hotel are you near? Veronica glanced blindly at the GPS screen. About 40 minutes from Boston. Good. Stay in Boston tonight. Not Greenwich. Veronica nodded automatically before realizing Claire couldn't see her. Okay? And Veronica, yes, do not cry in front of him again. The sentence stunned her. Not because it was cruel, because it sounded like armor. Claire's voice softened slightly afterward. You can cry later. Right now, you need to think. After the call ended, Veronica sat motionless for nearly a minute. Then Trevor texted again. You embarrassed me tonight. Another message immediately followed. My parents are furious. You made everything worse than it needed to be. Then another. Sign the papers and let's handle this like adults. Veronica stared at the screen in disbelief. Not once had he apologized. Not once had he asked if she was okay. Not once had he acknowledged what he had done to her. Everything was about his embarrassment, his family, his reputation, his inconvenience. For the first time, Veronica saw Trevor clearly without love distorting the image. And the clarity terrified her. The hotel Claire recommended overlooked the Boston harbor. Modern, quiet, expensive. Trevor would absolutely hate the room rate. That thought gave Veronica a tiny guilty flicker of satisfaction. The concierge smiled warmly when she checked in, completely unaware that the elegant woman in the navy dress was barely holding herself together internally. Inside the suite, Veronica finally removed her heels and collapsed onto the floor beside the bed instead of sitting on it. The room smelled faintly of cedar and white linen. It felt unfamiliar to occupy space without Trevor's preferences dictating everything. She sat there for a long time in silence. Then her phone lit up again. Trevor. This time she answered. What she whispered. Trevor's voice came sharp immediately. Where are you? Veronica laughed weakly. That's your first question? You disappeared. You announced your engagement while I was sitting there. His sigh came through the phone, heavy and irritated. Jesus Christ, Veronica, stop repeating that like I committed murder. The cruelty of the sentence made her go still. Not because it was shocking. Because once upon a time, Trevor would never have spoken to her this way. You blindsided me. I tried to avoid this becoming ugly. You invited your mistress to dinner with your wife. She's not my mistress anymore. Veronica felt physically sick. The arrogance, the entitlement, the complete inability to understand why she was devastated. Trevor lowered his tone, suddenly slipping into the manipulative calm he always used when he sensed resistance. You know this marriage has been dead for a while. No? Veronica whispered. You killed it quietly, while I kept trying to save it. Silence. Then Trevor said coldly, You're being emotional. That sentence almost destroyed her once. Tonight, it made something harden instead. I'm being betrayed. You're being dramatic. There it is, Veronica said softly. What the word you use whenever I react to your behavior. Trevor exhaled impatiently. Can we please just handle this privately? Not lovingly? Privately, always privately. Because public truth threatened powerful men. Veronica closed her eyes. Did everyone know tonight except me? Trevor hesitated. Tiny. But enough. My parents knew. The confession hit her harder than expected. Eleanor smiling at Madison suddenly made horrifying sense. Grant sliding over the divorce folder. The entire evening had been choreographed. Veronica's voice cracked despite herself. You humiliated me on purpose. No, Trevor snapped. I gave you a reality check. Reality check. As though she were delusional for expecting loyalty from her husband. Veronica ended the call before he could say anything else. Her entire body trembled afterward. Not from heartbreak anymore. From awakening. An hour later, Claire arrived carrying 2 coffees and a leather briefcase. The moment Veronica opened the hotel door, Claire hugged her tightly. Not carefully. Not politely. Firmly. Like someone trying to hold another person together, physically. Claire pulled back and studied Veronica's face. He really destroyed himself tonight, didn't he? Veronica let out a hollow laugh. You say that like I should feel powerful. You should feel angry. Claire sat at the small dining table and opened her laptop immediately. Show me everything. For the next hour, Veronica forwarded texts, uploaded photos of the settlement folder, and explained every detail from dinner. Claire's expression darkened steadily. Then she stopped suddenly at one bank document. Wait. Veronica looked up. Claire zoomed in. This account transfer, she said slowly. When did Trevor ask you to approve this? Veronica frowned. About 8 months ago. He said the company needed temporary liquidity support before an acquisition phase. Claire looked at her carefully. And you signed because you trusted him? It wasn't a question. Veronica nodded slowly. Claire typed rapidly for several moments, then went completely still. Veronica? Something in her voice changed. But Claire turned the laptop screen toward her. A business registration document filled the screen. An LLC, partially funded from the account Veronica signed over. Registered under a holding structure connected to Madison Vale. Veronica stared at the screen. The room suddenly felt too small, too hot, too unreal. He used our money, she whispered. Claire's eyes hardened. It appears your husband may have transferred marital assets into a company connected to the woman he's engaged to. The words barely felt real. Veronica sat frozen. The affair was horrible. The humiliation was horrible. But this was calculated, strategic, financial. Trevor hadn't just betrayed her emotionally. He may have been building another woman's future using Veronica's money. Claire slowly closed the laptop. Then she looked directly at Veronica. This is not just betrayal anymore, she said quietly. This may be fraud. Veronica barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Trevor standing beneath the chandelier with Madison's hand in his, announcing their engagement like Veronica had already disappeared. By 7 in the morning, grey light filled the hotel suite cold and heavy against the harbor windows. Claire was already awake at the small dining table, surrounded by legal pads, coffee cups, and printed financial records. Veronica stood near the window, holding untouched tea when her phone exploded with notifications. Instagram, texts, missed calls, messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. A sick feeling crawled up her spine instantly. She whispered. Claire looked up sharply. What happened? Veronica opened Instagram. And there it was. Madison's post. A professionally edited photo from the Whitaker dining room. Trevor smiling down at Madison. Madison holding out her ring beneath candlelight. The caption read, "Finally chosen. Some love stories are worth waiting for." Veronica stared at the screen so long, her vision blurred. At first glance, the photo looked perfect. Elegant, romantic, expensive. But then Veronica noticed something horrifying. The edge of navy blue fabric visible at the corner of the frame. Her dress. Madison had cropped her out of the photo, but not completely. The realization made Veronica feel physically ill. She had been in the room when the engagement photos were taken. Madison posted them anyway. Like Veronica was already erased. Like the humiliation itself was part of the celebration. Claire stood and crossed the room quickly. The second she saw the post, her expression darkened. She posted this already? Veronica nodded numbly. Comments flooded beneath the image every second. You two are perfect together. Finally official power. Couple. Energy. Obsessed with this ring. Then the more uncomfortable comments began appearing. Wait. Isn't he still married? This timeline feels messy. Wasn't his wife literally at dinner? Madison had not disabled comments yet. Arrogance. Claire took the phone gently from Veronica's hands. Good, she said calmly. Veronica blinked. Good. Let people document their own behavior. Claire immediately began screenshotting everything. Timestamps, comments, captions, engagement details, even the visible corner of Veronica's dress. Veronica sank slowly into a chair. I feel sick. You're grieving, Claire said softly, without looking up. But you're also waking up. The words settled strangely inside her. Because grief and awakening did feel disturbingly similar. Both tore things apart. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Trevor. She ignored it. Then another notification appeared. Madison Vale sent you a message. Veronica stared at it for several seconds before opening it. I truly hope one day you understand this wasn't meant to hurt you. Trevor and I didn't plan for things to happen this way. I think deep down, you already knew the marriage was over. You deserve someone who chooses you completely too. Claire read over Veronica's shoulder. Wow, she muttered. That's impressively cruel. Veronica felt something inside her shift again. Not sadness this time. Anger. Because Madison still thought she was the winner. She still believed she was the chosen woman in a tragic love story instead of a participant in deception. Veronica remembered the first time she met Madison, 2 years earlier. Trevor had brought her to a company charity event in Manhattan. She's brilliant, Trevor said back then. Exactly the kind of media strategist we need. Madison had been charming, polished, ambitious. Beautiful in the effortless way women became beautiful when they had never been emotionally broken yet. Veronica remembered noticing how intensely Trevor watched Madison speak that night. At the time, she ignored the feeling. Because trusting your husband was supposed to be healthy. Now every memory looked different. Every late meeting. Every cancelled anniversary dinner. Every business trip. Every moment Trevor called Veronica, paranoid for asking questions. She remembered once finding a gold earring in Trevor's car that wasn't hers. Trevor laughed and said she was exhausting herself inventing problems. That night, Veronica apologized to him. The memory humiliated her now. Claire interrupted her thoughts. I need names. Veronica looked up. Names, employees, executives, assistants, anyone who might know about Trevor and Madison before the engagement. Veronica hesitated. Then one face surfaced immediately. Natalie Brooks, Trevor's former executive assistant. Sharp, efficient, quiet, and always strangely tense around Madison. Veronica found Natalie's number buried in old contacts. Her thumb hovered over the call button. What if she refuses? Claire looked at her steadily. Then we find someone else. Veronica inhaled shakily and pressed call. Natalie answered on the fourth ring. Hello, Natalie. It's Veronica Barber. Silence. Then, immediate discomfort. Oh! Veronica closed her eyes briefly. Even that tiny reaction hurt. I know this is awkward, Veronica said carefully, but I need to ask you something honestly. Natalie lowered her voice instantly. Veronica, I really don't think I should get involved. The sentence confirmed everything before Veronica even asked. Claire silently gestured for Veronica to continue. Did everyone know? Another silence. Longer this time. Then Natalie sighed softly. Most people suspected. The words hit like ice water. Veronica stared at the harbor beyond the windows. How long I don't know exactly, Natalie said carefully. But the rumors started after the Denver conference last year. Trevor took Veronica to Italy for their anniversary 2 weeks after Denver. He bought her emerald earrings in Florence. He made love to her in a hotel overlooking the Arno River, all while already sleeping with Madison. Veronica pressed trembling fingers against her lips. Natalie Claire said quietly from beside her, This is attorney Claire Bennett. I represent Veronica. Natalie immediately sounded terrified. Oh my God! We're not asking you to do anything illegal, Claire continued smoothly. But if there was misconduct inside the company, we need to know. Natalie hesitated again, then finally spoke. Trevor promoted Madison really fast, she admitted. People talked about it constantly. Veronica's stomach twisted. She earned it. Trevor used to insist whenever Veronica questioned the favoritism. Now even those conversations felt contaminated. Natalie continued carefully. There were internal complaints too. Claire straightened instantly. What kind of complaints? Nothing official, Natalie said quickly. People were scared. But everyone noticed Madison got special treatment. Veronica suddenly remembered a dinner 6 months earlier. Trevor defending Madison aggressively after another executive criticized one of her campaigns. At the time, Veronica thought he was just being protective of talented employees. God. How many lies had she swallowed because she loved him? Claire exchanged a meaningful look with Veronica. Natalie Claire asked gently, Do any emails exist showing preferential treatment? Silence again. Then very quietly, Yes. Veronica's pulse jumped. Natalie lowered her voice even further. I still have some archived correspondence from when I left. Claire grabbed a pen immediately. What kind of correspondence? Salary approvals, internal recommendations, travel authorizations. Natalie hesitated. Some things looked inappropriate. Veronica almost couldn't process what she was hearing. Trevor hadn't just cheated. He may have been using company resources to elevate his mistress while Veronica funded parts of his business life. Claire spoke carefully now. Would you be willing to meet privately? Natalie sounded terrified again. If Trevor finds out, he won't, Claire interrupted calmly. A long pause followed. Finally, Natalie whispered, Okay. After the call ended, Veronica sat completely still. The room felt different now. Not softer, sharper, more dangerous. Trevor's affair was no longer just emotional betrayal hidden inside a marriage. It was becoming a pattern, a structure, a system built on manipulation. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Madison. I know you hate me right now, but I truly hope someday you can move on peacefully. Holding on to anger only hurts you. Veronica stared at the message in disbelief. Move on peacefully. From a woman wearing her husband's ring before the divorce papers even existed. Claire looked over her shoulder and scoffed. She really thinks she's the heroine. But Veronica barely heard her, because suddenly, something much colder settled into place inside her. Trevor spent years making her question her instincts, making her feel dramatic, jealous, emotional, difficult. Yet everyone around him already knew the truth. Everyone except the woman sacrificing herself to protect the marriage. Veronica slowly locked her phone and looked out at the grey Boston skyline. For the first time since the dinner, she stopped wondering how Trevor could do this to her. A more important question was beginning to form instead. How many women had Trevor Whitaker destroyed before her? As if the universe itself answered, Claire's phone vibrated with a new email notification. Claire opened it, then went still. What Veronica asked immediately. Claire looked up slowly. Natalie sent something already. Veronica's chest tightened. Claire turned the laptop screen toward her. An internal company email chain filled the screen. Trevor personally approving Madison's rapid promotion, private dinner expenses hidden under executive travel budgets, late-night hotel charges, special compensation requests, and at the bottom, a joke from one executive. Guess we all know who the real VP is. Veronica stared at the screen in horror. Then Claire quietly said the sentence that changed everything. Madison wasn't the beginning, Veronica. The room went silent. Claire looked back down at the email thread. She was just the one who got the ring. The coffee shop Natalie chose sat on a quiet side street in Cambridge, hidden between a bookstore and a flower shop. Claire approved immediately. No finance guys come here voluntarily, she said dryly as they walked inside. Veronica almost smiled. Almost. The rain had stopped overnight, but Boston still looked grey and exhausted beneath the February sky. Veronica wore a camel coat over a black sweater dress, trying to look more stable than she felt. Inside the cafe smelled like espresso and cinnamon. Normal. Peaceful. The kind of place where terrible truths shouldn't exist. Natalie Brooks was already seated in the corner when Veronica arrived. She stood immediately nervous enough to nearly knock over her coffee. Natalie looked different outside Trevor's office environment. Smaller, somehow. Less polished. Dark circles shadowed her eyes like she hadn't slept much either. Thank you for coming, Veronica said quietly. Natalie nodded tightly. Claire introduced herself with calm professionalism before sliding into the booth beside Veronica. For a few awkward seconds, nobody spoke. Then Natalie exhaled shakily. I always wondered what would happen if you found out. The sentence landed hard. Not if. When. Meaning everyone around Trevor assumed the truth would eventually explode. Veronica folded her hands carefully together beneath the table. How bad is it, she asked. Natalie looked down at her coffee. Do you want the honest answer? Yes. Natalie lifted her eyes slowly. Worse than you think. A heaviness settled over the table. Claire opened a leather notebook immediately. Start from the beginning. Natalie nodded once. At first, people just thought Trevor had a crush on Madison, she said. Executives flirt. It happens. Veronica's stomach tightened. But then she started getting things no one else got. What kind of things, Claire asked. Private strategy meetings. International travel approvals. Bonuses way above her level. Natalie hesitated. He rewrote entire reporting structures, so she answered directly to him. Veronica remembered asking Trevor once why Madison suddenly bypassed two senior managers. Trevor kissed her forehead and said she worried too much about office politics. Now every memory felt contaminated. Natalie continued quietly. People started talking after Denver. Again Denver. That conference had become a ghost inside Veronica's mind now. Natalie stirred her coffee absently. They disappeared together after the investor dinner. Everyone noticed. Veronica stared at the table. She remembered that exact night. Trevor had called from Denver sounding distracted. Veronica told him she missed him. He answered, "You're too emotional lately, Ronnie." The memory made her chest ache. Claire's voice cut gently through the silence. "Were there other women?" Natalie froze. The hesitation was answer enough. Veronica felt something cold move through her body. "How many?" she whispered. Natalie looked miserable now. "I don't know exactly. But there had been others." Of course there had. Trevor Whitaker loved admiration too much to stop at one affair. Veronica leaned back slowly against the booth. For years, she blamed herself for the distance in their marriage. Maybe she wasn't exciting enough, beautiful enough, relaxed enough, supportive enough. Meanwhile, Trevor had been collecting validation from other women like trophies. Claire remained focused. "You mentioned internal complaints." Natalie nodded. There were rumors about favoritism. A few women felt uncomfortable with Trevor's behavior. She lowered her voice. But nobody wanted to challenge him. "Because of Grant Whitaker?" Claire asked. Natalie gave a humorless laugh. Because Trevor was being groomed to take over everything, power, that was always the center of it. Trevor never acted like consequences applied to him, because for most of his life they didn't. Veronica looked toward the cafe window, where pedestrians passed outside, carrying umbrellas and grocery bags. Ordinary people, living ordinary lives. Meanwhile, her marriage had apparently become a corporate scandal waiting to happen. Natalie suddenly spoke again. There was one woman who almost reported him. Claire looked up immediately. Who Natalie hesitated. Harper Ellis. The name sounded vaguely familiar. She worked in strategic operations, Natalie explained. Brilliant. Trevor became obsessed with her during a merger project. Veronica closed her eyes briefly. Obsessed. Not in love. Not connected. Obsessed. Because Trevor loved pursuit more than commitment. "What happened?" Claire asked. Natalie swallowed. She quit suddenly. Why Natalie looked directly at Veronica for the first time? Because nobody believed her. The sentence hollowed something out inside Veronica. Claire's expression hardened instantly. Did she file anything official? No. She got scared. Veronica imagined another woman sitting alone, somewhere questioning her own instincts the same way Veronica once did. How many women had Trevor convinced they were overreacting? How many women walked away carrying shame that belonged to him? The thought made Veronica nauseous. Natalie reached carefully into her bag and slid over a folder. Printed emails, expense reports, travel authorizations. Claire opened it immediately. The deeper she read, the darker her expression became. Then Natalie quietly added, "There's more." Veronica looked up. Natalie twisted her fingers together nervously. Trevor wasn't just sleeping with Madison. Veronica's heartbeat slowed strangely. Like her body already knew, another impact was coming. He used people emotionally, Natalie whispered. Women who worked under him, especially. Claire looked up sharply. Meaning, he made them feel chosen. Natalie's eyes filled slightly with discomfort now. Special. Important. Then if things became inconvenient? She shrugged helplessly. They disappeared. Veronica finished softly. Natalie nodded. The entire cafe suddenly felt too warm. Veronica remembered every time Trevor mocked messy women in business. Every time he claimed emotional women destroyed their own careers. What if he had helped destroy them first? Claire flipped through another set of emails. Then she stopped suddenly. What is this? Natalie leaned forward. That's one of the expense reports that got altered. Claire's eyes narrowed. Altered how Trevor changed personal travel expenses into executive client meetings. Veronica stared at the paperwork. Madison's hotel stays, private dinners, luxury trips, all hidden beneath corporate accounts. Trevor hadn't even bothered hiding properly because he never expected scrutiny. Why would he? Men like Trevor moved through life assuming someone else would clean up behind them. Claire closed the folder carefully. This is bigger than divorce, she said quietly. Natalie looked terrified hearing it out loud. You can't mention my name. We won't unless necessary, Claire assured her. Veronica suddenly asked the question burning inside her. Did everyone think I knew? Natalie's face fell instantly. No. That hurt worse somehow. Because they pitied her. The loyal wife, smiling beside her husband, everyone else understood better than she did. Natalie's voice softened. Honestly, Veronica, most people felt bad for you. Veronica looked down quickly before her emotions showed again. She had spent years trying to become the perfect wife in Trevor's world. Elegant enough, patient enough, quiet enough. Meanwhile, strangers in his office saw the humiliation before she did. The shame nearly crushed her. Then Claire's phone buzzed across the table. Trevor, calling Veronica again. Claire raised an eyebrow. You answering? Veronica stared at the screen for several seconds, then nodded slowly. Yes. She accepted the call and put it on speaker. Trevor's voice came immediately irritated and sharp. Where the hell are you? Not are you okay? Not can we talk? Where are you? Like she was property that had wandered away. Veronica kept her voice calm. In Boston. With who? That's none of your business. A dangerous silence followed. Then Trevor lowered his tone into false patience. You need to stop escalating things. Claire smirked slightly at that. Veronica looked out the cafe window. You announced your engagement before divorcing your wife. You keep saying that like it changes reality. No, Veronica said quietly. It changes who you are. Trevor exhaled harshly. Jesus Christ. Veronica, I'm trying to handle this respectfully. Natalie physically flinched beside her, because now someone else could hear it too. The manipulation, the rewriting of reality. Veronica suddenly realized something important. Trevor sounded exactly the same with every woman. Charm first, control second, cruelty when necessary. You humiliated me publicly, Veronica said. And now you're trying to destroy my career. There it was. Not heartbreak, career, image, money, always money. Claire scribbled something into her notebook. Trevor continued coldly. My family tried to do this peacefully. You're the one making it ugly. Veronica's expression slowly changed, because suddenly she understood something clearly for the first time. Trevor truly believed himself. He genuinely thought the problem wasn't betrayal. The problem was her refusal to accept it quietly. The realization chilled her. You know what's ugly? Veronica asked softly. Trevor sighed impatiently. Not this again. Turning your wife into collateral damage because honesty would have been inconvenient. Silence. Then Trevor snapped. You're acting insane. Natalie's eyes widened. Claire looked completely unsurprised. And Veronica? Veronica finally stopped feeling afraid of him. Because once you heard the pattern clearly enough, manipulation stopped sounding powerful. It started sounding pathetic. She ended the call without another word. The cafe fell silent afterward. Natalie looked shaken. That's exactly how he talks to people when he's losing control. Claire nodded slowly. Veronica stared at the dark phone screen in her hand, then at the folder full of hidden women, hidden payments, hidden truths. For years, Trevor Whitaker made her believe she was difficult for asking questions. Now, Veronica understood the real problem. She had finally stopped apologizing for seeing him clearly. The first thing Claire did after leaving the cafe was make Veronica buy a new phone. Trevor tracks patterns, she said, while they walked through a sleek electronics store in downtown Boston. Men like him don't lose control gracefully. Veronica glanced up from the display case. Men like him? Claire gave her a look. Wealthy men raised to believe consequences are optional. The sentence lingered unpleasantly in Veronica's chest. Because it was true.
Trevor Whitaker had spent most of his life protected by money charm and the Whitaker name. Even his mistakes were treated like inconveniences instead of character flaws. The affair was only shocking to Veronica because she still believed Trevor operated under the same moral rules she did. Now she understood differently. Claire handed the cashier a black credit card. Use the joint account, she told Veronica quietly. Veronica hesitated instinctively. That feels like survival. Claire interrupted. Good. Learn the difference between survival and guilt. The words followed Veronica long after they returned to the hotel. By evening, Trevor had already sent 14 text messages and 6 missed calls. Not one apology. Not one expression of remorse. Only pressure. Only management. Only control. Claire sat at the dining table, reviewing the audio file Veronica recorded during Trevor's hotel visit the previous night. The room stayed silent, except for Trevor's voice playing softly through Claire's laptop speakers. The dinner was the only way to make you face reality. Then later, my family wanted this handled quickly. And finally, you're dragging this out because you can't let go. Claire paused the recording. He admitted coordinated pressure, she said thoughtfully. Veronica wrapped both hands around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. Does that help us? Claire leaned back slightly. It helps me understand what kind of man we're dealing with. That's not the same thing? No, Claire agreed calmly. But understanding someone's psychology matters in litigation. Veronica stared toward the harbor lights outside the window. I keep replaying everything she admitted quietly. Every conversation, every fight, every time he told me I was overreacting. Claire studied her carefully. That's normal. No, Veronica whispered. It's humiliating.
Claire closed the laptop slowly. Veronica, emotionally manipulative people survive by rewriting reality. If they can make you question your instincts long enough, they never have to question themselves. The sentence hit harder than Veronica expected. Because Trevor had spent years making her distrust her own feelings. If she cried, she was dramatic. If she questioned him, she was insecure. If she noticed distance, she was paranoid. Eventually, Veronica stopped trusting herself altogether. That realization frightened her more than the affair. Her phone buzzed again. Trevor. This time, Claire gestured for her to answer. Speaker Claire mouthed. Veronica inhaled slowly before accepting the call. Trevor's voice came immediately. Finally. No hello. No concern. Just irritation. What do you want? Veronica asked quietly. I want you to stop acting irrationally. Claire rolled her eyes so hard Veronica nearly laughed despite herself. Trevor continued before she could respond. My parents are furious. There it was again. Not grief. Not regret. Reputation. Veronica leaned back slowly against the chair. Your mother smiled while you announced your engagement. That's not fair. Veronica almost choked on the absurdity. Not fair. She was trying to support me. The sentence stunned Veronica, silent for a moment. Support him, as though Trevor were the victim of his own betrayal. Claire scribbled something quickly across her legal pad while listening. Trevor lowered his voice into that calm tone Veronica once mistook for emotional maturity. You disappearing to Boston and talking to lawyers is escalating things unnecessarily. You invited your mistress to a family dinner while still married to me. Trevor exhaled harshly. God. Veronica, stop saying mistress like we're in some trashy soap opera. What should I call her? Silence. Then Trevor snapped coldly. My fiancée. The word sliced through her chest anyway. Pain didn't disappear just because clarity arrived. Claire watched Veronica carefully. Trevor continued speaking, frustration rising beneath his polished tone. You need to understand the situation logically. Logically. Of course. Trevor always weaponized logic whenever empathy would expose him. You and I haven't worked in a long time. So you cheated. I moved on. Before ending the marriage. You're obsessed with technicalities. Technicalities. Veronica closed her eyes briefly. 15 years, reduced to technicalities. Then Trevor made a mistake. A small one. But enough. My father already had legal strategy prepared because we knew you'd react emotionally. Claire's pen stopped moving instantly. Veronica straightened slowly. Trevor hesitated. Too late. My family was trying to avoid a disaster. Veronica looked at Claire across the table. Claire's expression sharpened immediately. Trevor kept talking, unaware he was digging himself deeper. You could have signed the papers quietly and moved on with dignity. Dignity. That word again. As though silence were noble. As though humiliation became classy if a woman endured it quietly enough. Veronica's voice dropped dangerously calm. So the engagement dinner was supposed to pressure me into signing. No, Trevor snapped instantly. That's not what I said. But that's what happened. Silence. Trevor realized it too. Claire slowly hit save on the recording file. Trevor's voice hardened. Are you recording me? Veronica didn't answer. His breathing sharpened immediately. Jesus Christ, Veronica. She ended the call. The hotel room fell quiet. Then Claire looked up slowly. That she said calmly was very useful. Veronica stared down at her trembling hands. Her pulse was racing now. Not from fear, from realization. Trevor was unraveling because she stopped cooperating with the version of reality he created. Claire organized several files into neat piles. Here's what matters. Now, she said. Trevor and his family are terrified of exposure. Because of the affair, Claire almost laughed. No. Rich men survive affairs every day. Then what? The acquisition. Veronica frowned slightly. Claire turned the laptop toward her, displaying financial articles and company announcements. Whitaker Capital Partners. Expansion. Mergers. Projected valuation increases. Trevor's company was weeks away from finalizing a major acquisition deal with a larger investment group based in Chicago. If misconduct allegations surfaced now, everything could collapse. Veronica stared at the screen. That's why they wanted me quiet. Claire nodded slowly. Not because they care about peace. Because scandal threatens money. The realization changed something inside Veronica. Trevor didn't just betray her emotionally. He calculated her silence financially. Suddenly, the rushed divorce papers made perfect sense. The engagement announcement, the pressure, the coordinated family dinner, all of it designed to neutralize risk before the acquisition closed. Veronica felt physically cold. My God. Claire's eyes stayed steady. You're not dealing with a guilty husband, Veronica. You're dealing with a man protecting a business transaction. The sentence hollowed her out, because somewhere deep down, she still wanted Trevor to be heartbroken too, still wanted evidence that she mattered beyond logistics. But every new discovery revealed something uglier. Trevor wasn't devastated. He was inconvenienced. That night, Veronica finally agreed to return briefly to the house in Greenwich, while Trevor attended investor meetings in Manhattan. Claire insisted they move quickly. You need your personal documents before this gets uglier. The Whitaker house felt eerie without Trevor inside. Too quiet. Too perfect. Veronica walked through the marble foyer, slowly overwhelmed by memories. Christmas parties, anniversary dinners, silent arguments, lonely mornings. The house suddenly looked less like a marriage and more like a museum dedicated to appearances. Claire stayed downstairs on the phone while Veronica entered the master bedroom alone. The air still smelled faintly like Trevor's cologne. For one terrible second, grief hit her so hard she almost collapsed. This was the room where they planned children. The room where Trevor once held her after nightmares. The room where she spent years trying to become enough for him. Now it looked staged, artificial. She opened drawers methodically. Passport, birth certificate, financial records, jewelry from her mother, an old framed photo from college, and finally a hidden box containing letters. Trevor wrote her before their wedding. Veronica opened one slowly. You're the only person who makes me feel understood. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Not because she still believed him, because maybe once upon a time he meant it. That possibility hurt worst of all. Downstairs, Claire suddenly called out sharply, Veronica! Her tone made Veronica hurry toward the staircase. Claire stood near the kitchen island holding her phone. What happened? Claire lifted the screen toward her. A financial news alert flashed across it. Whitaker Capital finalizing multi-million acquisition. This month. Claire looked directly at Veronica. Now we know exactly what they're afraid of. Veronica stared at the headline, then slowly looked around the massive empty house Trevor valued more than honesty. And for the first time since the dinner, she realized she might actually have the power to destroy his perfect life. 3 nights later, Veronica stood in front of another mirror. But this time, she wasn't dressing for Trevor. That realization felt strange, almost unfamiliar. The black silk gown hugged her figure with understated elegance, sharp at the shoulders and simple everywhere else. Claire had insisted on the dress. You are not attending this gala as a wounded wife, she said while fastening Veronica's bracelet. You're attending as a woman who built half the rooms those people pretend Trevor built alone. The charity gala took place every February at the Ashford Hotel in Manhattan. All the money, private donors, corporate executives, political families. Veronica had co-chaired the event for 6 years before Trevor's company became its primary sponsor, which meant tonight was dangerous. Not legally, socially. Claire adjusted Veronica's sleeve one last time. You still don't have to go. Veronica looked at her reflection. For years, she skipped events when Trevor thought her presence complicated optics. She stayed quiet when his mood darkened. She learned how to shrink gracefully. Not tonight. If I disappear, Veronica said softly, they win twice. Claire smiled faintly. There she is. The ballroom glowed gold beneath enormous chandeliers when Veronica entered. Conversation softened instantly around her. Not completely, but enough. People noticed. Of course they noticed. Because everyone in Manhattan finance had already seen Madison's engagement post. And now Trevor Whitaker's legal wife had just walked into the room, looking calm, elegant, and very much not erased.
Veronica felt hundreds of eyes sliding toward her as she crossed the marble floor. Some sympathetic, some curious, some hungry for scandal. Claire stayed beside her like armor. A waiter offered champagne. Veronica accepted mostly to steady her hands. "You're doing fine," Claire murmured. Veronica nodded slightly. Then she saw them. Trevor and Madison stood near the center of the ballroom beneath a wall of white roses displaying the Whitaker Capital logo. Madison wore silver tonight. Trevor's hand rested possessively against the small of her back. The sight still hurt. No amount of awakening erased 15 years of loving someone. Trevor noticed Veronica first. His expression changed instantly. Not guilt, alarm. Madison followed his gaze. For one brief second, genuine panic crossed her face too. Good. Let them feel observed for once. Trevor immediately started toward Veronica. Claire leaned closer. "Remember," she whispered, "calm women terrify manipulative men." By the time Trevor reached them, his polished smile had already snapped into place for public viewing. "Veronica," he said quietly through clenched teeth. "What are you doing here?" Veronica almost laughed. She glanced around the ballroom slowly. "At a gala I helped build." Trevor lowered his voice further. "This isn't the place." "No," Veronica agreed softly. "Apparently family dinners are your preferred venue for humiliation." Trevor's jaw tightened immediately. "Can we not do this publicly?" Publicly. Always publicly. As though his greatest suffering came from witnesses. Madison approached carefully, then champagne glass, trembling slightly in her hand. "Hi, Veronica." The room nearby subtly quieted. People were listening now, without pretending they weren't. Veronica turned toward Madison slowly. Madison attempted a small smile. "I hope we can all behave like adults tonight." Claire nearly choked on her champagne beside her. But Veronica stayed perfectly calm. "Adults," Veronica said quietly, "usually end one marriage before announcing another engagement." The sentence landed like a dropped knife. Several nearby conversations stopped completely. Madison's face flushed instantly. Trevor stepped closer. Enough. But Veronica wasn't loud, wasn't emotional, wasn't hysterical. And somehow, that made the moment far more devastating for him. Madison forced another brittle smile. "I know this situation is painful. You posted engagement photos while I was still sitting at the dinner table." Veronica interrupted gently. Madison froze. Trevor looked furious now. "You're making a scene?" "No," Veronica replied calmly. "I'm existing in one." Claire looked impressed. A wealthy older woman from the board approached awkwardly then. "Veronica," she said softly, "it's lovely to see you." Unlike Trevor's family, this woman actually sounded sincere. Veronica smiled politely. "Thank you, Diane." Diane glanced uneasily between Trevor and Madison before lowering her voice. "I was surprised by the announcement." "Surprised?" Interesting word choice from Manhattan society. "It meant everyone's talking about this and your husband looks terrible." Trevor cut in sharply. "We're handling things privately." Claire finally spoke. "Not anymore." Trevor's eyes snapped toward her. "Excuse me," Claire calmly pulled a slim envelope from her clutch purse. "Formal legal notice," she said smoothly. "You've officially been served regarding marital asset concerns and discovery requests." The color drained from Trevor's face instantly. Madison stared at the envelope. "What is that?" she whispered. Trevor ignored her completely. "You serve me here?" Claire's smile remained cool and professional. "You announced an engagement before filing for divorce. We assumed public timing mattered to you." Veronica almost felt the impact physically. Trevor took the envelope with rigid fingers. The ballroom noise continued around them, but now everything sounded distant.
muted. Trevor opened the documents quickly. Veronica watched his expression change line by line. Irritation, confusion, then something darker. Fear. Claire's filing wasn't simple divorce paperwork. It included financial misconduct, concerns asset transfer, inquiries, requests for internal company communications, and formal discovery related to funds connected to Madison's LLC. Madison looked between them helplessly. What does this mean? Trevor folded the papers sharply. It means Veronica is trying to destroy my company. The sentence hit Veronica strangely. Not our marriage, not our lives, his company. His priorities had never sounded clearer. Claire crossed her arms calmly. No, Trevor. Veronica is refusing to protect misconduct that harmed her financially. Several people nearby definitely heard that. Trevor noticed too. Panic flickered behind his eyes for the first time since Veronica met him. Because powerful men feared embarrassment almost as much as exposure. A younger investor nearby suddenly looked uncomfortable and walked away quickly. Good. Let the room whisper. Veronica spent years carrying humiliation privately, so Trevor could remain admired publicly. Not anymore. Trevor lowered his voice dangerously. You have no idea what you're doing. Veronica looked directly at him. No, she said quietly. I finally do. The sentence visibly shook him. Because Trevor expected rage, begging, chaos, not clarity. Madison suddenly touched Trevor's arm nervously. Trevor, maybe we should leave. But Trevor wasn't looking at Madison anymore. He was staring at Veronica like he no longer recognized her. Maybe he didn't. Because the woman who once apologized after finding another woman's earring in his car would never have survived this version of herself. A man from the acquisition team approached cautiously then. Trevor, he said carefully, can we talk privately for a moment? Trevor's entire body stiffened. The man's eyes briefly flicked toward the legal envelope still visible in Trevor's hand. Then toward Veronica. Then away again. The shift was tiny, but Veronica noticed it instantly. So did Trevor. The room was changing. The narrative was changing. For the first time since the affair exploded, Trevor Whitaker was no longer controlling the story. He grabbed Madison's wrist tightly. Excuse us. Then he pulled her away across the ballroom. Madison stumbled slightly, trying to keep up. Veronica watched them disappear into a private hallway near the ballroom entrance. Claire sipped her champagne calmly. Well, she said, that went beautifully. Veronica let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her pulse still raced beneath her calm expression. Do you think he's scared? Claire looked toward the hallway Trevor vanished into, then back at Veronica. Oh, he's terrified. Veronica stared across the glittering ballroom filled with wealthy strangers, pretending not to gossip. And suddenly, she realized something profound. Trevor's greatest weapon had never been money. It had been Veronica's silence. And now he no longer had it. Veronica didn't realize how loud silence could be until she stopped living inside Trevor Whitaker's world. The new apartment in downtown Boston wasn't extravagant. No marble floors, no chandeliers, no curated elegance designed to impress investors or family friends. Just glass walls, winter light, and a view of the Charles River frozen under pale morning snow. And yet, when she stood barefoot on the wooden floor for the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Space. Not physical space. Emotional space. Claire helped her move in dropping a box labeled "Kitchen, do not lose" onto the counter with a loud thud. This place is dangerously close to giving you main character energy, Claire said, scanning the apartment approvingly. Veronica gave a weak smile. I don't feel like a main character. Claire raised an eyebrow. That's because you've been living as a supporting character in someone else's life for a decade. The sentence landed harder than it should have. Veronica didn't argue, because it was true. The first night alone felt wrong in her body. Not unsafe, just unfamiliar. She kept checking her phone out of habit, expecting Trevor's messages, his demands, his corrections, his silent punishments disguised as disappointment. But the screen stayed quiet.
No. Where are you? No. You're overreacting. No. Don't embarrass me. Only silence. And silence, Veronica was learning, could be both terrifying and healing. She sat on the floor instead of the couch, back against the wall, wrapped in a blanket she didn't remember buying. The city lights flickered outside like distant thoughts she no longer had to obey. For the first time in years, no one knew where she was unless she told them. That realization made her chest tighten. Not with fear, with grief. Because she realized how deeply she had been controlled without ever calling it control. 3 days later, Claire forced her into therapy. You don't get to process a psychological war with spreadsheets and coffee, she said, pushing Veronica into a quiet office in Beacon Hill. Dr. Evelyn Carter was calm in a way that made Veronica immediately defensive. I don't know how to do this, Veronica admitted as she sat down. Dr. Carter nodded gently. Most people don't. That's why they come. Silence settled. Then the questions began. Not dramatic ones, simple ones. When did you first feel small in your marriage? Veronica blinked. I wasn't small. But even as she said it, memories surfaced uninvited. Trevor laughing when she cried during an argument. Trevor calling her too sensitive after she confronted him about late nights. Trevor telling her she was lucky he was patient with her emotions. Trevor rewarding silence and punishing questions. Her throat tightened. I think, she whispered. I started shrinking without noticing. Dr. Carter didn't interrupt. That silence made it worse. And better. That night, Veronica opened the box she had avoided since moving in. Inside was a framed wedding photo. Trevor smiling like the world belonged to him. Her smiling like she was trying to deserve it. She stared at it for a long time. Then something strange happened. The image didn't look romantic anymore. It looked staged, performative. Like two people acting out a version of happiness they had both agreed to believe in. Her phone buzzed. Trevor. Of course. She hesitated, then opened it. We were good once. Don't rewrite history because you're angry. Another message followed immediately. You're letting lawyers poison your mind. Veronica stared at the screen. Not crying, not shaking, just observing. For years, she would have responded, explained, defended, softened. But tonight, something inside her refused. Trevor didn't want truth. He wanted compliance, dressed as peace. She locked the phone without replying. And for the first time, she felt something quietly powerful boom in her chest. Distance. The next morning, Veronica went to a non-profit office in downtown Boston. She had once worked there before marriage swallowed her identity. They didn't recognize her immediately. That hurt more than she expected, until one of the directors looked up and said softly, "Wait, Veronica Barber, you used to handle our restructuring reports." Something in her froze. Used to, as if she had already been erased professionally too. But then the woman smiled. "We've been hoping you'd come back." Veronica sat still. "I thought I was out of the field." The director laughed lightly. "Trevor Whitaker didn't build your career. You did." The sentence cracked something open.
Meanwhile, across the city, Trevor was no longer silent. He was escalating. Claire showed Veronica the legal correspondence that morning. Requests, pressure, corporate lawyers circling like sharks. He's scared, Claire said. Veronica frowned. Of what Claire looked at her directly. Not losing you, a pause. Losing control. That afternoon, Veronica's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Then a message. I need to talk to you, not as his fiancée, as someone he lied to. Madison Vale. Veronica froze. The world tilted slightly, not dramatically, but enough. Claire read it over her shoulder and exhaled slowly. Well, she said. That didn't take long. Veronica didn't respond immediately. Her instinct wasn't anger. It was something more complicated. Recognition. Because suddenly, Madison wasn't the enemy in a love triangle anymore. She sounded like another woman standing at the edge of the same collapse. Veronica typed carefully. Public place. My lawyer will be present. A reply came seconds later. I understand. And I'm sorry. Veronica stared at the words. Sorry. Not weaponized. Not performative. Just fragile. Claire leaned against the counter. What are you thinking? Veronica didn't answer immediately. Then finally, I think he didn't just replace me. Claire raised an eyebrow. I think he trained a system where everyone becomes replaceable. Silence. Heavy. Accurate. Outside, snow began falling again over Boston. And somewhere in that quiet city, two women were about to realize they had been living inside the same lie. The cafe Madison chose was nothing like the places she used to post on Instagram. No marble tables, no golden lighting, no carefully staged luxury meant to signal success. Just a quiet hotel cafe in downtown Boston, half empty at midday, with soft jazz playing too low to feel comforting. Veronica arrived first. Claire sat beside her, silent but alert like a guard dog disguised as a corporate attorney. Veronica didn't know what she expected Madison Vale to look like in real life without the armor of social media. But it wasn't this. Madison walked in slowly, almost hesitating at the entrance like she wasn't sure she deserved to be there. No designer confidence, no curated smile. Her hair was tied back loosely, her makeup minimal. Her hands trembled slightly as she spotted Veronica. For a second, neither woman moved. Then Madison approached the table. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. Veronica didn't respond immediately. She just studied her. This was the woman Trevor had announced as his future in front of a dinner table, where Veronica still legally sat as his wife. This was the woman who posted engagement photos hours after Veronica was humiliated. But now she looked afraid. Claire gestured lightly. Sit. Madison obeyed instantly. Silence stretched between them. Then Veronica spoke first. You said you wanted to talk about lies. Madison nodded quickly. Yes? Her voice cracked slightly on the word. Claire leaned forward. Start from the beginning. Madison exhaled shakily. I didn't know, she said immediately. Not at first. Veronica didn't react. She had stopped trusting that phrase. Not at first. Madison continued staring down at her hands. Trevor told me he was separated. He said the divorce had already been filed. Claire's expression sharpened instantly. Veronica's jaw tightened. He said that months ago. Madison added quickly. Before anything happened between us. Silence. Heavy. Veronica's voice came out controlled, almost detached. So you believed him? Madison nodded miserably. I wanted to. That sentence landed differently. Not innocence. Not guilt. Desperation. Claire crossed her arms. and the engagement, Madison flinched. That was supposed to be official, she whispered. He said the final papers would be signed after the acquisition closed. He said it needed to look clean for investors. Veronica felt something cold move through her chest. Clean. Even betrayal had been strategic. Madison looked up finally. Her eyes were red. I didn't realize I was part of a timeline, she said quietly. I thought I was the ending. Veronica didn't answer, because that was the cruelest part. Madison wasn't wrong. She had been part of a timeline, just not the final chapter. Claire spoke carefully. When did you realize the truth? Madison hesitated. Then her voice dropped. The night of the dinner. Veronica's fingers tightened slightly on her glass. Madison continued. When I saw the folder with your name on it, and the way his parents looked at you, I realized something was off. She swallowed. And then I asked him. Claire leaned forward slightly. And what did he say? Madison gave a hollow laugh. He said you were unstable. Veronica didn't react outwardly, but something inside her tightened painfully. Madison's voice broke slightly. He said you refused to accept reality, that you were delaying the divorce out of spite. She looked up at Veronica now. I believed him because he said it so easily. Silence. Then Claire spoke colder now. That's what manipulators do. Madison nodded slowly. I know that now. A long pause followed. Then Madison reached into her bag. Veronica stiffened slightly. She placed her phone on the table. I want you to see something. Claire immediately gestured caution, but Madison already unlocked it. She slid the screen toward Veronica. Messages. Trevor's messages. Veronica read the first line. Veronica is not emotionally stable enough to handle this rationally. Don't engage her directly. Another message. Keep your tone soft with her. She tends to distort conversations when she feels cornered. Another. Once the acquisition is secured, everything will settle. Just maintain consistency until then. Veronica felt her stomach drop. These weren't romantic messages. They were instructions. Operational guidance. Claire read over her shoulder and went very still. This is controlled narrative management, she said slowly. Madison nodded. I didn't know he was talking about you like this, she whispered. I thought you were really unstable. Veronica looked up sharply. Madison immediately shook her head. I'm not saying that was right, she said quickly. I'm saying that's what I was told. Her voice cracked. I feel sick about it now. Silence. Heavy again. Veronica stared at Madison for a long moment. Then she said quietly, He didn't love you either. Madison flinched. Veronica continued, voice steadier now. He doesn't build relationships. He builds roles for people. Madison's eyes filled. I know, she whispered. I think I was just the replacement role. Claire exhaled slowly. So what do you want from this conversation? Madison hesitated, then answered honestly. I want out. The simplicity of it made the room feel colder. Veronica studied her carefully. Why come to me? Madison's voice dropped. Because you're the only person he can't fully control anymore. That sentence hit differently. Not flattering, not empowering. Strategic truth. Madison continued. If you go forward with the legal case, he loses leverage. Over me. Over everything. Claire nodded slowly. That's accurate. Madison looked at Veronica directly now. I don't want to be part of this anymore, she said. I don't want to be used to hurt you or anyone else. Veronica felt something complicated shift inside her. This wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't alliance. It was recognition. Two women sitting on opposite sides of the same manipulation. Veronica finally asked the question she hadn't expected to care about. Are you still with him? Madison shook her head immediately. No. A pause. He called me a complication after the dinner. Claire raised an eyebrow. Madison's lips trembled slightly. He said timing was bad, that I needed to be patient. Veronica let out a slow breath. Of course he did. Madison continued quietly. I moved out 2 days ago. Silence. Then Claire asked the most important question. Do you have evidence? Madison nodded. Yes. She slid another folder across the table. Emails, travel receipts, internal messages, expense approvals tied to Trevor and Madison's relationship being hidden inside corporate structures. Claire opened it immediately. Her expression darkened with every page. Veronica watched quietly. Not numb, not emotional, just processing. Finally, Claire closed the folder. This is enough, she said. Madison looked at Veronica. Am I going to be part of your lawsuit? Veronica hesitated, then answered honestly. I don't know yet. Madison nodded slowly, accepting that. Then she added quietly, I'm not asking for forgiveness. A pause. I just didn't want to be silent anymore. For the first time, Veronica saw something beyond betrayal in Madison. Not innocence, not villainy, but exhaustion. The same exhaustion Veronica had carried for years. Claire stood slowly. We should go through everything carefully, she said. This changes the scope. Madison nodded. As Veronica stood to leave, Madison spoke one last time. Veronica. Veronica paused. Madison looked down. I'm sorry, she said softly, for believing him. Veronica held her gaze for a moment, then replied quietly. So was I. And for the first time since the engagement dinner, the apology didn't feel like defeat. It felt like truth finally spoken out loud. The first thing Claire did when they returned to the apartment was lock the door. The second thing she did was lay Madison's folder across the kitchen table like it was evidence in a federal case. Because now it was. Veronica stood by the window, staring out at Boston's skyline, but she wasn't really seeing it. Her mind kept replaying Madison's voice. I believed him because he said it so easily. That was the real weapon Trevor Whitaker had always used. Certainty. Not truth. Certainty. Claire opened Madison's phone files on her laptop. Minutes later, she stopped scrolling. Jesus, she muttered. Veronica turned immediately. What Claire didn't answer right away, she just rotated the screen. Veronica stepped closer and saw it. More messages. Trevor's tone was completely different here. Not romantic, not defensive. Strategic, cold, controlled. Veronica will eventually accept the settlement once she understands resistance is pointless. Until then, keep your distance and stay patient. Veronica froze. Claire scrolled further. Do not let her frame this emotionally. She tends to distort facts when she feels abandoned. Another message. The acquisition closes in 6 weeks. After that, everything becomes simpler. Silence filled the apartment. Heavy, sharp, real. Veronica slowly sat down without realizing she was moving. He's not even speaking about me like a person, she said quietly. Claire's voice was low. No. He's speaking about you like a variable. The word hit harder than it should have. Variable. Not wife, not partner, not human emotion. Just a problem to be solved. Veronica stared at the screen again. This is how he thinks, she whispered. Claire nodded once. Yes. A long pause. Then Claire added, "And this is how men like him stay in power for so long." Veronica looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Claire closed the laptop slowly. "They don't rely on one lie," she said. "They rely on systems of people believing slightly different versions of the same lie." Veronica felt something cold spread through her chest. Madison believed she was chosen. Eleanor believed she was protecting her son. Trevor believed he was managing outcomes. And Veronica had believed she was overreacting. Claire continued, "That's why your reaction always looked emotional to them. Because they each had a different narrative running at the same time." Veronica whispered, and none of them included the truth. Claire shook her head. "No, they all included pieces of it. That was the most dangerous part. Half-truths stacked into something convincing enough to destroy someone's reality." Veronica leaned back slowly. "I feel like I lived in a story I didn't write." Claire's expression softened slightly. "You did." A vibration interrupted them. Veronica's phone. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. A woman's voice came through. Shaky. Careful. "Is this Veronica Barber?" Veronica tensed immediately. "Yes." A pause. "Then my name is Harper Ellis." Claire immediately straightened. Veronica stepped closer to the phone. Harper continued. "I used to work at Whitaker Capital." Silence. Veronica's heart rate increased slightly. Claire mouthed, "Put it on speaker." Veronica tapped it. Speaker activated. Harper's voice was quieter now. "I saw your situation in the news thread circulating inside the company." Veronica frowned. "What news thread?" A bitter laugh came through the line. "Oh, so you don't know yet." Claire leaned forward instantly. "Know what?" Harper exhaled. "Trevor's been dealing with internal complaints for years." Veronica's stomach tightened. Complaints about what? Claire asked sharply. A long pause. Then Harper said the sentence that changed the entire direction of the case. "Behavioral abuse of authority." Silence. Even the air felt heavier. Harper continued quickly, as if afraid she would lose courage. "I wasn't the first, and I wasn't the last." Veronica felt a strange ringing in her ears. Claire's voice sharpened. "Are you willing to speak formally?" Another pause. "I already tried once," Harper said quietly. That sentence carried weight. Failure? Consequences? Fear. Claire softened slightly. "What happened?" Harper hesitated. "Then I was told I misunderstood the situation." Veronica closed her eyes briefly, because she knew that sentence. She had lived that sentence. Harper continued. "They moved me out of the department. Then I resigned." Claire leaned forward. "Do you have documentation?" "Yes," Harper said immediately. Another pause. "I saved everything." Veronica's breath caught slightly. Claire asked carefully, "Why come forward now?" Harper's voice cracked just slightly. "Because I saw her." Veronica froze. "Me?" she whispered. "Yes," Harper said softly. And I recognized the pattern. Silence stretched again. Then Harper added something quieter. "You're the first one who didn't disappear quietly." The room felt suddenly too small. Claire asked, "Can you meet us?" Harper hesitated. "Then yes, but not alone." Claire nodded instantly. "That's fine." After the call ended, Veronica didn't move for several seconds. Then she whispered, "How many women?" Claire didn't answer immediately. Because the honest answer was already forming. Too many. The next morning, Claire arranged a meeting location. Neutral. Public. Safe. a legal office conference room with glass walls and security check-ins. Veronica sat beside Claire, hands folded tightly in her lap. She wasn't shaking anymore. That was new. Not calm, just contained. Claire noticed it. "You're quiet." Veronica nodded slightly. "I'm listening differently now." Claire gave her a careful look. "Good." The door opened. Harper Ellis walked in. She looked older than her voice sounded. Tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from long-term emotional exhaustion. She sat across from them slowly. For a moment no one spoke. Then Harper exhaled. "I wasn't sure I should come." Claire nodded. "But you did." Harper looked at Veronica. "I didn't think I'd ever meet you." Veronica studied her carefully. "What did he do to you?" Harper didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, "He made me feel like everything I achieved belonged to him." Silence. Claire didn't interrupt. Harper continued. "At first it felt like opportunity. Fast promotions, visibility, mentorship." Her hands tightened slightly. Then it became dependency. Veronica understood that word too well. Harper's voice dropped. "And when I tried to step away," she stopped. Claire leaned forward slightly. "When you tried to step away," Harper swallowed. "I was told I would be difficult to rehire anywhere in the industry." Silence. Veronica felt something sharp move through her chest. Not just anger, recognition. Harper continued. "There were emails, internal discussions. Everything was framed as performance concerns." Claire's expression hardened. "Do you still have them?" Harper nodded. "Yes." She placed a USB drive on the table. "I kept everything after I left." Claire picked it up immediately. "This is enough to reopen multiple claims." Harper looked down. "I don't want revenge," she said quietly. "I just don't want it to happen to someone else." Veronica felt something shift inside her at that sentence, because that was exactly what she had started feeling too. Not revenge, pattern recognition. Harper looked at Veronica directly. "I saw your engagement photos," she said softly. Veronica stiffened slightly. Harper continued carefully. "I saw how people reacted." A pause. "And I knew you didn't know the full story yet." Veronica whispered, "I didn't." Harper nodded. "That's how it starts." Claire closed the USB case slowly. "This is now a formal investigation level case file," she said. Harper looked relieved and terrified at the same time. Then she added one final sentence. "Grant Whitaker knew." The room went still. Veronica blinked. What Harper's voice dropped. Trevor's father. He knew about at least 2 internal complaints. Claire's expression changed instantly. "Are you certain?" Harper nodded. "He was involved in the response discussions." Silence. That changed everything. Because now it wasn't just Trevor. It was infrastructure, family systems, corporate protection, generational shielding. Veronica slowly leaned back in her chair. "So it wasn't just him," she said quietly. Claire looked at her carefully. "No. It was a machine." Harper nodded once. "That's exactly what it felt like." Veronica stared down at her hands. For years, she thought she lost her marriage. Then she thought she lost her dignity. Now she was realizing something far bigger. She had been inside a structure designed to protect itself at all costs. Claire stood slowly. "We're filing tomorrow." Harper looked up sharply. Veronica didn't speak immediately. Then she nodded. Not because she wanted revenge, not because she wanted destruction, but because silence had already protected them long enough. And now it was someone else's turn to be heard. The Whitaker dining room
looked exactly the same. That was the most disturbing part. Same polished mahogany table, same crystal chandelier, same carefully curated sense of inherited power.
But Veronica wasn't the same woman who had stood here weeks ago frozen while Trevor announced another woman as his future. Now she sat at the opposite end of the table. Not alone. Claire was beside her. Harper sat slightly farther back, hands clasped tightly, still visibly uneasy in a room that had once belonged to people like Trevor Whitaker. And for the first time, Veronica wasn't here to survive the conversation. She was here to end it. The door opened. Trevor walked in first, then Madison, then Eleanor Whitaker, and finally Grant Whitaker. The family that had once arranged her humiliation now stepped into a room where they were not in control. Trevor stopped the moment he saw Veronica. His expression tightened. "You didn't need to bring an audience," he said flatly. Claire smiled politely. "We're all very tired of private conversations that turn into public betrayals." Eleanor's eyes narrowed immediately. "This is a family matter." Veronica looked at her calmly. "No," she said softly. "It stopped being a family matter the moment you tried to erase me from my own marriage." Silence. Grant set his briefcase down slowly. "This is unnecessary escalation." Claire opened a folder. "It's called Discovery." Trevor exhaled sharply. "You're turning this into a legal war." Veronica finally looked at him directly. "No," she said. "You already did that when you used my money, my silence, and my name as collateral for your affair." Madison shifted uncomfortably beside Trevor. She looked different now, less confident, more human. Eleanor scoffed. "This is absurd." Trevor made mistakes, yes, but Claire interrupted immediately. "No. Let's stop sanitizing it." She slid documents across the table. Bank transfers, internal emails, expense reports, legal complaints, Harper's signed affidavit. The room changed instantly. Trevor's eyes flicked over the papers. His jaw tightened. "What is this?" Claire spoke calmly. "This is evidence of financial misrepresentation, misuse of marital assets, and coordinated pressure to force a signature under duress." Grant stepped forward. "This is exaggerated interpretation." Claire didn't blink. "It's called documentation." Madison suddenly spoke, voice shaking slightly. "I didn't know about any of this." All eyes turned to her. Trevor's expression hardened instantly. "Madison?" She stepped back slightly. "No," she said quietly. "Don't." A silence, heavier than any argument, filled the room. Harper spoke for the first time. "I worked under you," she said to Trevor. Trevor's eyes snapped toward her. Recognition flickered. "Security removed you," he said flatly. Harper nodded. "After I reported behavior concerns." Eleanor stiffened. "This is harassment." Claire turned the page. "No. This is pattern evidence." Grant's voice dropped dangerously. "You have no idea what you're threatening." Claire finally looked at him directly. "Yes, I do." She pushed another document forward. "This is a timeline of asset transfers from joint marital accounts into a private LLC partially tied to Madison Vale." Madison froze. What Trevor's expression changed immediately. "Careful," he said sharply. Claire didn't stop. Funds originating from Veronica Barber's inheritance were used to support company restructuring efforts that indirectly funded Ms. Vale's private business ventures. The room went silent. Veronica watched Trevor carefully now. This was the first time she saw him, not angry but cornered. Grant's voice turned cold. "You're making legal assumptions." Claire nodded. "We're making legal claims." Trevor suddenly turned to Veronica. This is what this is about. Veronica didn't flinch. This is about truth. Trevor scoffed. You're punishing me because I moved on. Claire laughed once, sharp and humorless. No, Trevor. This isn't about moving on. This is about concealment. Madison suddenly stepped forward. I want out, she said quietly. Everyone turned again. Trevor's voice sharpened immediately. Well, Madison swallowed. I'm done being part of this. Eleanor's face tightened. You're being emotional. Madison looked at her.
For the first time, she didn't shrink. I was lied to. Silence. Veronica watched her carefully. Madison continued. I thought I was chosen. I thought this was love. A pause. But I was just a replacement timeline. Trevor's patience finally snapped. This is insane. He turned to Veronica. You're destroying everything over ego. That sentence hit something old inside her, but it didn't break her anymore. Veronica stood slowly. The room shifted instantly. Everyone focused on her. Even Trevor. Especially Trevor. She spoke calmly. I spent 15 years believing love meant endurance. A pause. I believed if I stayed patient enough, kind enough, understanding enough, I could fix something that was already broken. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised even her. But I wasn't in a relationship, she continued. I was in a system where my stability was used to cover your instability. Trevor stepped forward. That's not true. Veronica looked at him directly. It is. Silence. Harper spoke softly behind her. She's right. Eleanor turned sharply. Excuse me, Harper didn't back down. I saw it from the inside. Grant's voice hardened. This meeting is over. Claire closed her folder slowly. No, she said. It's just beginning. Then she added something that changed the temperature of the entire room. We're filing today. Trevor stared at her. What exactly are you filing? Claire answered without hesitation. Financial misconduct, marital asset diversion, coercive pressure, and evidence of institutional concealment. Silence. Then Trevor turned to Veronica. For the first time, no arrogance. Only disbelief. You're really doing this. Veronica held his gaze. Not angry, not emotional, just clear. You did this, she said quietly. Something inside Trevor cracked, but instead of remorse, fear replaced it. Grant stepped forward quickly. These will destroy reputations. Claire nodded. Yes? Madison looked down. Eleanor whispered, Veronica, think about what you're doing. Veronica answered softly. I have. A pause. And for the first time, I am. Trevor's voice lowered. You'll regret this. Veronica looked at him for a long moment, then said something she never thought she would say to him again. I already regret staying as long as I did. Silence. Heavy. Final. Claire gathered the documents. We'll see you in court. Harper stood slowly. Madison didn't move. Trevor looked at Veronica like he was trying to find the woman he used to control. But she was gone. Not angry. Not broken. Just finished. As Veronica walked out of the dining room, she didn't look back. And for the first time in years, the Whitaker family realized they were no longer the ones holding the power. By the next morning, the Whitaker world was already cracking. Not loudly. Not publicly at first, but quietly, in the way powerful systems begin to fail before anyone admits they are failing. Veronica stood in Claire's office while the first legal filings were prepared. Outside the glass walls, Boston moved like nothing important was happening. Inside, everything was changing. Claire didn't look up from her screen. "They've already called 3 times, she said. Who Veronica asked. Claire gave a dry smile.
Your former in-laws are discovering that lawyers don't answer to dinner table authority anymore. Veronica didn't respond. That sentence still felt strange inside her body. Former in-laws. As if her entire marriage had become something already archived. Claire turned the laptop slightly toward her. A headline was already beginning to circulate in financial circles. Whitaker Capital, under internal review following legal claims. Veronica stared at it. "It's spreading fast," she said quietly. Claire nodded. That's what happens when a controlled narrative loses control. At the Whitaker estate, the mood was no longer polished. It was reactive. Grant Whitaker stood in his study phone, pressed tightly against his ear. "This is containable," he said sharply. "We just need no listen to me. We need to stabilize messaging." Eleanor paced behind him, pale and tense. Trevor stood by the window silent for once. Not calm, calculating. Madison had already left the house. That fact alone had shifted everything. Grant ended the call abruptly and turned. "This is your mess," he said coldly at Trevor. Trevor didn't flinch. "It's not a mess," he replied. "It's a misunderstanding being amplified." Eleanor snapped. "A misunderstanding doesn't involve frozen assets and legal filings." Trevor finally turned. And for the first time, his voice lost its practiced smoothness. "She's not supposed to fight back." Silence. That was the problem. Veronica was supposed to stay predictable, emotional, manageable. Instead, she had become procedural, strategic, dangerous. 2 hours later, Claire reviewed the emergency motion request. "They're trying to block disclosure," she said. Veronica sat across from her, unusually still. "Can they?" Claire shook her head. "Not without admitting why they're blocking it." That was the trap. Every defensive move now created more exposure. Claire leaned back slightly. "They're panicking." Veronica frowned. That fast, Claire gave her a look. "Men like Trevor don't fear consequences," she said. "They fear losing control of the timeline." Veronica exhaled slowly. For years, Trevor controlled timing. When conversations happened, when truths were revealed, when emotions were allowed, now he no longer controlled anything. That evening, Trevor finally called Veronica directly. She answered on speaker without hesitation. His voice was different, not angry this time. "Tight, controlled, careful, we need to talk," he said. Claire sat beside her silently. Veronica answered calmly. "We already did." A pause. Then Trevor said, "You're escalating something that doesn't need to exist." Claire almost laughed at that. Veronica remained steady. "You created it." Another pause. Then Trevor's voice lowered. "This is bigger than you think." Veronica blinked slightly. "Bigger than what? Than your lawyers," he said. That was the first real slip. Claire leaned forward slightly. Veronica asked quietly, "Are you threatening me?" Trevor hesitated. "Too long." "Then I'm trying to make you understand consequences." Claire reached over and gently pressed a button. The call stayed connected but now recorded through legal capture software. Veronica's voice stayed calm. "I understand consequences," she said. A pause. "I just understand them differently than you do now." Trevor exhaled sharply. "This isn't about fairness anymore." "No," Veronica said softly. "It never was." Silence. Then Trevor said something colder. "You think this ends with you walking away clean?" Claire's eyes sharpened instantly. Veronica didn't respond. Trevor continued. "You're attacking a system you don't understand." Claire mouthed careful, Veronica finally spoke. I used to think I didn't understand it, she said quietly. A pause. But I do now. And that was the difference. Trevor had spent years convincing her she was outside the structure. Now she was inside it, documenting it. Silence stretched. Then Trevor ended the call abruptly. That night, Madison appeared again. Not through social media, not through messages. In person. Outside Claire's office building. Veronica noticed her immediately through the glass doors. She looked smaller again. Less like the woman from Instagram. More like someone who had stopped sleeping properly. Claire noticed too. That's unexpected, she said. Veronica stepped outside. Cold air hit her instantly. Madison hesitated before speaking. I shouldn't be here, she said. Veronica nodded once. Probably not. A pause. Then Madison exhaled shakily. They're saying I'm part of the financial case now. Veronica studied her. I didn't include you. I know, Madison said quickly. But Trevor did. That landed heavily. Veronica frowned. What do you mean? Madison's voice dropped. He told his lawyers I was involved in restructuring decisions. Claire, standing behind Veronica, stepped closer immediately. That's not accurate. Madison shook her head. I know. A pause. Then she said quietly, he's trying to distribute blame. That was the Whitaker strategy. Always decentralize responsibility, make everyone partially guilty, so no one could stand alone. Madison looked at Veronica directly. I'm not here to fight you, she said. Veronica studied her carefully. Why are you here? Madison hesitated, then answered honestly. Because I think he's going to destroy everyone before he admits he lost control. Silence. Claire spoke carefully. What makes you think that Madison's voice dropped? Because he's not negotiating anymore. A pause. He's reacting. That distinction mattered. Negotiation implied logic. Reaction implied fear. Back inside the office, Claire closed the blinds. They're entering containment mode, she said. Veronica frowned slightly. What does that mean? Claire turned toward her. It means they're no longer trying to win, she said. They're trying to limit damage. That was the shift. The Whitaker machine had stopped expanding. It was collapsing inward. Claire continued. And people who lose control of narrative systems tend to escalate before they accept loss. Veronica's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated. Then answered. A different voice. Not Trevor. Not Madison. Grant Whitaker. Cold. Controlled. Dangerous. You are making a serious mistake, he said immediately. Veronica didn't respond. Grant continued. This will not end the way you think. Claire leaned closer, listening. Veronica finally spoke. It will end in court. A pause. Then Grant said something that carried more weight than anger. You're not just suing a man. Veronica didn't flinch. I know. A longer pause. Then Grant added, You're suing a legacy. Silence. Claire's expression tightened slightly. Veronica answered calmly. Then maybe it needs to be examined. That was the moment everything shifted again. Grant ended the call immediately. Claire exhaled slowly. They're preparing for escalation. Veronica looked at her. What kind? Claire closed her laptop. The kind where powerful people stop believing rules apply to outcomes. Silence. Veronica felt it then. Not fear, not hesitation, but clarity. For years she lived inside Trevor's world. Now she was watching it react to her existence. And for the first time, she was not shrinking inside it. She was standing outside it. And it was breaking.
The courthouse smelled like paper-cold air and history. Veronica had imagined this moment differently when she was younger. Back then, she thought courtrooms were where guilty people confessed and truth automatically won. Now she understood something more complicated. Courtrooms were where truth was organized, not guaranteed, organized. Claire walked beside her through the marble corridor. "You don't have to perform anything today," she said quietly. Veronica nodded once. "I'm done performing," she replied. That sentence surprised even her, because it was true. Trevor arrived first. Of course he did. He was already seated when Veronica entered the courtroom. Tailored suit, controlled posture. The Whitaker expression, the one that made him look untouchable in business meetings. But Veronica saw it now. Not confidence. Containment. Madison sat further back, separated. Eleanor and Grant Whitaker were behind Trevor, both rigid. A family that used to look like power now looked like pressure. Claire placed the case file on the table with quiet precision. Opposing counsel did the same. The judge entered. Everything shifted into motion. Formal, structured, final. Trevor watched Veronica as she sat down. For the first time, he wasn't looking at her like a possession. He was assessing her like a risk. That realization alone almost made her smile. Claire began speaking. Clear, measured, controlled. She laid out everything: financial transfers from joint marital accounts concealed, restructuring of assets, links between company funds and external LLCs, documentation of coercive pressure before signing attempts, timeline of relationship overlap. Internal corporate communications showing intentional narrative control. Each point landed like a brick. Trevor's attorney tried to interrupt twice. Claire didn't let him. Veronica sat still through all of it. Not because she didn't feel anything, but because she finally understood something important. This wasn't emotional anymore. This was structural. When it was Trevor's turn, he stood slowly. He spoke carefully, measured. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a misinterpretation of business operations intertwined with a personal dispute." Veronica almost laughed. That was how he reduced everything. Misinterpretation, personal dispute, as if betrayal could be downgraded into inconvenience. He continued, "My former spouse is reacting emotionally to the dissolution of a long-term marriage." Claire immediately stood. "That is incorrect framing," she said sharply. "We are not here because of emotional reaction. We are here because of documented financial misconduct." Trevor's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't break. Not yet. Then the judge turned slightly. "Miss Barber," he said. Veronica felt the room shift. Claire leaned closer. "You can speak if you want, or let me continue." Veronica looked at her for a moment, then stood. The courtroom went silent, in a different way now. Not procedural silence. Attention silence. Veronica stepped forward slowly. No trembling, no hesitation. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "I spent 15 years believing that love meant patience," she said. Trevor's expression tightened slightly. "I believed that if I was understanding enough, supportive enough, quiet enough, I would be valued." A pause. But I wasn't valued. She looked directly at Trevor now. I was managed. Something flickered in his expression. Uncertainty. Not guilt. Recognition that control was slipping. Veronica continued. "I didn't come here to punish anyone for falling out of love." A pause. "I came here because decisions were made about my life, my finances, and my identity, without transparency or consent." Silence. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "This isn't about emotion," she said softly. "It's about truth being hidden behind authority."
Trevor shifted slightly in his seat.
For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Claire resumed. She presented the financial timeline again, this time slower, clearer, unavoidable. The judge reviewed documents carefully. Opposing counsel attempted to argue intent. Claire interrupted again. Intent is irrelevant when documentation shows pattern. That sentence mattered. Pattern. Not mistake, not misunderstanding. Pattern. Then came the turning point. Claire placed the final document on the table. Your Honor, we are also submitting internal communications, indicating coordinated efforts to manage reputational risk by pressuring the plaintiff into signing agreements under misleading conditions. Trevor's expression changed instantly. Eleanor leaned forward sharply. Grant went still. Madison, sitting at the back, lowered her gaze. The judge read. Longer than before, the room held its breath. The temporary financial preservation order is granted, the judge said. A pause. Further disclosure is required. Not victory, not defeat, but exposure. Outside the courtroom, everything felt different. The air was colder. Or maybe Veronica finally felt it properly. Trevor stepped out first. He stopped when he saw her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he walked closer. Was this necessary? He asked quietly. Not angry now, not loud. Careful. Veronica studied him. For years, she thought his silence meant strength. Now she understood it meant control. It was necessary, she said simply. Trevor exhaled. This will damage everything. Veronica nodded slightly. Yes? A pause. Then she added, because everything was built on incomplete truth. That sentence hit differently. Trevor looked at her longer now, like he was trying to find the version of her he used to manage. But she wasn't there anymore. Madison approached slowly from behind. She didn't speak, just stood nearby. Eleanor and Grant remained further back, a family that no longer knew which version of itself was real. Trevor's voice dropped. You think you won? Veronica didn't answer immediately. Then she said quietly, I stopped losing. Silence. The distinction mattered more than victory. Later that evening, Claire sat with Veronica in the apartment. The city outside glowed quietly. No celebration. No collapse. Just continuation. Claire closed the file. They're going to escalate internally now, she said. Veronica looked up, how Claire hesitated. Settlement pressure. Reputation management. Possibly narrative shifts. Veronica frowned slightly. Narrative shifts? Claire nodded. They will try to redefine what happened before the evidence defines it for them. Silence. Then Claire added, but they're running out of control points. Veronica looked out the window. Snow was beginning again. Soft, quiet, almost peaceful. I used to think ending a marriage would feel like loss, she said. Claire looked at her carefully. And now Veronica paused. It feels like stopping a long negotiation with myself. Claire didn't respond immediately. Then she said softly, that's the first honest thing you've said about it. Veronica almost smiled. Almost. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She opened it. A message. Not from Trevor. Not from Madison. From Grant Whitaker. You have opened a door that will not close easily. Veronica stared at it for a long time, then locked the phone. And for the first time since everything began, she didn't feel like someone reacting to a storm. She felt like someone standing at its center, finally understanding its shape. The Whitaker empire didn't collapse in a single moment. It unraveled slowly.
like expensive fabric pulled thread by thread until the structure beneath could no longer hold its shape. Months had passed since the courtroom. Boston had shifted seasons. Winter melted into a colder kind of spring. Gray wet, uncertain, Veronica stood in front of a new office building downtown, holding a folder under her arm. No longer labeled wife, no longer labeled supporting role, just her name. Veronica Barber. Claire had helped her set up the foundation quietly. No press release, no announcement. No Whitaker mention anywhere in the paperwork. Start small, Claire had said. Start clean. And she did.
Inside the Whitaker world, things were different now. Not destroyed, but exposed. The acquisition had stalled. Then paused. Then under review. Which in corporate language meant something very specific. We no longer trust you enough to proceed. Grant Whitaker had stepped back from several board responsibilities. Eleanor had disappeared from social circles she once ruled effortlessly. Trevor remained in the company, but not in control.
That distinction mattered more than anyone admitted. Veronica didn't follow the news obsessively anymore. She didn't need to. Claire updated her when necessary. He's trying to stabilize investors again, Claire said one evening over dinner. Veronica nodded. How? Same way men like him always do, Claire replied, rewriting the narrative. Veronica stirred her tea slowly. And is it working? Claire hesitated. Less and less. Madison had left Boston entirely. She sent Veronica one final message before disappearing into a quieter state, a smaller city, a slower life. I'm keeping the baby, but I'm keeping my distance from him. Veronica didn't respond immediately, not because she didn't care, but because she finally understood something important. Some people didn't need her participation to survive their healing. The foundation Veronica built grew slowly, a legal and financial support network for women escaping emotionally and financially controlled relationships. Not dramatic rescues, not revenge cases. Just quiet reconstruction. Bank accounts reopened. Identities restored. Stories finally documented correctly. The first woman who walked in cried before she even sat down. I didn't think anyone would believe me, she said. Veronica nodded. I do. And for the first time, that sentence didn't feel like a memory of her past self. It felt like purpose. One afternoon, Claire arrived with a file she didn't immediately place on the table. That's the Whitaker settlement closure documents, she said. Veronica looked up slowly. Final? Claire nodded. Final. Silence settled between them. Not heavy, just complete. Veronica opened the folder. Inside were signatures, legal confirmations, asset finalizations. Everything reduced to structured language, no emotion left in it. Just resolution. Claire watched her carefully. You don't have to go back, she said. Veronica understood what she meant. The Whitaker estate. The final acknowledgement. The symbolic ending. But Veronica didn't hesitate. I want to. The house looked the same. That was the strange part. Same driveway. Same silence. Same architecture designed to impress and intimidate. But now it felt smaller, not physically, emotionally. Like something that once loomed large had lost its power to define her. Eleanor answered the door. She looked older, not broken, just diminished. Veronica, she said carefully. No hostility, no warmth either, just recognition. Grant appeared behind her, then finally Trevor. He stood in the hallway like a memory trying to pretend it was still real. Veronica stepped inside. No hesitation, no performance, just presence. The dining room still held echoes of that night. The engagement night. The humiliation. The beginning of everything unraveling. Trevor gestured slightly toward the table. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly. Veronica nodded once. "I did." A pause. Grant placed the final documents on the table. "This closes everything," he said. Claire had already reviewed them. Veronica didn't need to, but she opened them anyway, not for verification, for closure. Trevor watched her carefully. Not the arrogant version of him anymore. This one looked tired. "You really went through with it," he said. Veronica didn't look up immediately. Then, "Yes." Silence. Eleanor finally spoke. "I thought you would want something different by now." Veronica looked at her. "What did you think I would want?" Eleanor hesitated. "Stability," she said carefully. Veronica almost smiled. "I had stability," she replied softly. "It just required my silence." That sentence landed differently now. No one argued, because no one could. Trevor stepped closer. Not aggressive, not controlling, just uncertain. "You destroyed a lot," he said quietly. Veronica met his gaze. "No," she said calmly. "I stopped protecting what was already collapsing." A pause. Then she added, "You just didn't notice because I was holding it up for so long." Something flickered in his expression. Not anger. Understanding. Too late. Grant spoke finally. "So this is it." Veronica nodded. "This is it." Eleanor looked down. Trevor didn't speak immediately. Then he asked something quieter than anything he had ever said to her before. "Did you ever love me?" The question hung in the room. Heavy. Human. Veronica didn't answer quickly, because the truth was complicated. She remembered loving him. Before control. Before distortion. Before silence became survival. "Yes," she said finally. Trevor nodded slightly, as if that mattered. Then Veronica added something else. "But I love myself less every year I stayed." Silence. That was the final truth. When she left the Whitaker house, no one followed her. No dramatic goodbye, no final confrontation. Just closure. Claire waited in the car outside. "How was it?" she asked gently. Veronica looked out the window at the house one last time. "It was smaller than I remembered," she said. Claire nodded. "That's what healing does." They drove away without looking back. Weeks later, Veronica received one final message. From Trevor. Not demanding. Not controlling, just short. "I understand now. I'm sorry." Veronica stared at it for a long time, then set the phone down. Not because she didn't care, but because she finally understood something he didn't yet fully grasp. Apology was not the same as repair, and understanding was not the same as transformation. She didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but out of completion. That evening, Veronica stood in her office overlooking Boston. Women came and went through the foundation downstairs, some crying, some relieved, some still afraid, all of them rebuilding. Claire joined her quietly at the window. "You ever think about how this ended?" Claire asked. Veronica considered the question, then shook her head slightly. "No." A pause. "I think about how it started." Claire looked at her, and Veronica watched the city lights reflect against the glass. "It started the moment I believed love required me to disappear." Silence. Then Claire smiled faintly. "That's a good ending." Veronica nodded. "No," she said softly. "That's the beginning of my life." Outside, Boston moved forward without ceremony. And so did she.
What Veronica learned was not just about betrayal, it was about identity.
For years she believed love meant endurance. She thought being a good wife meant staying calm when she was confused, staying quiet when she was hurt, and staying loyal, even when loyalty was not returned. She mistook patience for strength and silence for maturity. But what she slowly discovered was something far more painful and far more freeing. You cannot heal inside a system that benefits from your silence. Trevor didn't just break her trust. He slowly rewrote her perception of herself. He made her question her instincts, doubt her emotions, and apologize for reacting to disrespect. And that is how emotional manipulation survives, not through dramatic cruelty, but through constant quiet erosion of self-worth. But the moment Veronica stopped asking, "How do I fix this relationship?" and started asking, "Why am I accepting this treatment?" everything changed. Walking away was not the victory. Rebuilding herself was. Healing didn't come from revenge or watching Trevor lose everything. It came from remembering who she was before she became someone's emotional support system, financial safety net, and silent sacrifice. It came from realizing that love without respect is not love. It is dependency disguised as devotion. And perhaps the most important lesson of all closure is not something someone gives you. It is something you take back when you stop waiting for accountability from people who benefit from avoiding it. Veronica didn't become stronger because she destroyed Trevor's world. She became stronger because she stopped living inside it. And that is where her real life finally began. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. What moment hit you the hardest and why? And if you enjoy emotional storytelling about betrayal, awakening, and self-worth, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us that walking away is sometimes the most powerful form of love we can give ourselves. Because sometimes the end of a broken story is just the beginning of your own.